You ever think about how life can flip on you so fast? One day, you're living what feels like a decent enough existence, working hard, coming home to someone you trust, and then boom. Everything falls apart. That's where I found myself last week, standing in my own living room as two other agents cuffed her. My wife. It all started with a routine case. Well, routine is relative when you work for the FBI. We were tracking down this low-life scumbag named Trevor, a small-time crook with big dreams of being something more. He wasn't much older than 25, but he carried himself like he owned the world. Tattoos up and down his arms, greasy hair slicked back, and a smirk that made me want to punch him every time I saw him. Turns out, Trevor had been running a counterfeit operation out of some dingy garage downtown. Nothing too flashy, nothing too clever, but dangerous enough to warrant our attention. What I didn't expect was that Trevor would lead me straight to my own front door. When we finally caught up with him, it wasn't at the garage. It was here, at my house. The place I came home to after long days chasing criminals. The place I thought was safe. When we busted through the door, guns drawn, there she was, my wife, Sarah, sitting on the couch next to Trevor like they were watching Sunday football together instead of plotting their little scheme. Sarah looked up at me, her face pale but defiant. And Trevor, oh, Trevor. His bravado vanished the second he realized who'd just walked into the room. He froze, eyes wide, hands trembling. Within seconds, his pants were wet. Literally. The guy pissed himself right there in front of everyone. I couldn't even process it at first. All those years of marriage, all those nights spent wondering if I was doing enough for her, giving her enough attention, it boiled down to this moment. This betrayal. Her cheeks flushed red, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong by showing up uninvited. Hands behind your back, Agent Ramirez barked, snapping me out of my daze. She slapped cuffs on Trevor first, who whimpered like a kick dog, and then moved to Sarah. Watching those cold metal bracelets click around her wrists felt surreal. Unreal. Impossible. How could you leave your husband for this little piece of crap? Ramirez asked, shaking her head in disbelief. She glanced between Sarah and Trevor, clearly disgusted. Seriously, lady. What were you thinking? Sarah lifted her chin, refusing to look at me. I guess I've always liked bad boys, she said, her voice sharp, almost mocking. Ramirez let out a bitter laugh. Bad boys. You mean that little coward with wet pants? She jabbed a thumb toward Trevor, who was now sobbing quietly into his chest. You were married to him. She pointed at me this time. One of the toughest agents in the bureau. A man with more bravery awards than most agents hope to get in their entire careers. And you wanted a bad boy. Her words stung, not because they weren't true, but because they hit too close to home. Yeah, I'd earned those accolades. Yeah, I'd faced down situations that would make normal people lose sleep for weeks. But none of that mattered to Sarah, apparently. None of it was enough to keep her happy. I stood there, silent, letting the scene unfold around me. There wasn't much else I could do. Words felt useless, hollow. How do you argue with someone who's already made up their mind? Someone who looked at the life you built together and decided it wasn't worth sticking around for. As they led her away, Sarah shot me one last glance over her shoulder. For a split second, I thought I saw regret flicker across her face. Maybe even guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that same steely defiance she'd worn since the moment we burst in. And just like that, she was gone. Now, sitting alone in the quiet of my empty house, I can't help but wonder, was it really about Trevor? Or was it about me? Did I fail her somehow without realizing it? Or was she always looking for something, or someone, else? Whatever the answer is, I'll probably never know. All I'm left with now are questions, and memories of a woman I thought I knew. Weeks passed after Sarah's arrest, though weeks feels like an understatement. It felt more like years. Days blurred together in a haze of unanswered questions and restless nights spent staring at the ceiling. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bed, not anymore. Instead, I crashed on the couch, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer made sense. Every corner of the house whispered her name. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the lavender dish soap she always used. Her favorite mug sat on the counter, chipped at the rim from years of use. Even the damn TV remote was always on her side of the couch. I hated how everything reminded me of her, yet I couldn't bring myself to change a thing. Getting rid of her stuff would have felt too final, like admitting defeat. And I wasn't ready for that, not yet. Work became my refuge. Not because it gave me purpose, though it did, but because it kept me busy. Too busy to think about her. Too busy to wonder why she'd thrown away everything we had for someone like Trevor. My colleagues tiptoed around me at first, offering awkward condolences or patting me on the back as if they understood what I was going through. They didn't. No one did. How could they? I was supposed to be the strong one, the guy who faced danger head-on without flinching. But this was different. This cut deeper than any bullet ever could. One evening, after another long day at the office, I decided to take a drive. Just me, the open road, and the hum of my truck's engine. I ended up outside the city limits, where the streets turned into winding country roads lined with tall pines. I hadn't planned to go anywhere specific, I just needed to escape the suffocating silence of my house. That's when I saw it, the old cabin by the lake. It belonged to my grandfather, who passed it down to me years ago. I hadn't visited in ages, life got in the way, as it often does, but something about it called to me now. Maybe it was the simplicity of the place, the way it stood untouched by time. Or maybe it was the promise of solitude, far away from the chaos of my current reality. I parked the truck and stepped out, breathing in the crisp air. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of peace, a small, fragile thing, but there nonetheless. Inside, the cabin was exactly as I remembered it, worn wooden floors, faded curtains, and a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. There were photos on the mantel, snapshots of happier times. One caught my eye, a picture of Sarah and me taken during a weekend trip here shortly after we got married. We looked so young, so full of hope. She was smiling, her hair blowing in the breeze, while I held her close, grinning like an idiot. I picked up the frame, studying it closely. Was that really us? Had we ever been that happy? It was hard to reconcile the woman in the photo with the one who'd betrayed me. Betrayal has a way of rewriting history, making you question everything you thought you knew. But as I stood there, staring at the photo, something shifted inside me. Anger, that heavy, burning rage I'd carried since the day I found her with Trevor, began to loosen its grip. Not because I forgave her, but because holding onto it was exhausting. Carrying that weight wasn't punishing her, it was destroying me. Over the next few days, I stayed at the cabin, letting the quiet seep into my bones. I chopped wood, fixed the creaky porch steps, and even managed to catch a few fish. Simple tasks, but they grounded me in a way nothing else had. Slowly, painfully, I started piecing myself back together. Then, one night, as I sat by the fire nursing a cup of coffee, I heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought I imagined it, the cabin was miles from anyone, but the sound came again, louder this time. Curious, I opened the door to find Agent Ramirez standing on the porch, bundled up in a thick coat. "Mind if I come in?" she asked, her breath visible in the cold air. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Ramirez and I weren't exactly friends, we worked together, sure, but that was it. Still, I nodded and stepped aside, letting her in. She glanced around the cozy interior before settling into a chair by the fire. "Nice place," she said, unzipping her coat. "Figured you might need some company." "I'm fine," I replied automatically, though the words rang hollow even to my own ears. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "Sure you are. That's why you've been hiding out here for days instead of dealing with things." Her bluntness caught me off guard. "What do you want me to say, Ramirez? That I'm pissed? That I feel like a failure?" "Because yeah, I am. But none of that changes anything." "No, it doesn't," she admitted. "But bottling it all up isn't helping either. Look, I've seen guys like you crash and burn before. Don't let this break you. You're better than that." Her words hit a nerve, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I'd spent so much energy trying to protect others, whether it was my family or the people I served as an agent, that I'd forgotten how to take care of myself. And now, when I needed strength the most, I felt weaker than ever. For the first time in weeks, I let myself talk. Really talk. About Sarah, about Trevor, about the anger and hurt and confusion swirling inside me. Ramirez listened patiently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When I finally ran out of words, she leaned forward, her expression serious. "You deserve better," she said simply. "Not just in a partner, but in life. Don't waste your energy trying to understand why she did what she did. Some people aren't worth figuring out." Her advice stuck with me long after she left. Over the following weeks, I began to focus less on what I'd lost and more on what I still had, my career, my health, my freedom. Sure, Sarah had walked out, and yes, it hurt like hell, but I realized something important: her choices didn't define me. Only mine could do that. Eventually, I returned to the city, ready to face whatever came next. Life wasn't perfect, I doubted it ever would be again, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward instead of standing still. And sometimes, that's enough. Months passed since I returned from the cabin, and though life hadn't magically fixed itself, I felt lighter. Like I'd shed some invisible weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Work was still demanding, but it no longer consumed me the way it once had. I started taking weekends off, not to retreat into isolation like before, but to rediscover pieces of myself I'd forgotten about. I reconnected with old hobbies, hiking, fishing, woodworking. Simple things, really, but they reminded me of who I was outside of my job, and outside of Sarah. I even joined a local gym, not because I wanted to look better, though that wasn't a bad side effect, but because I needed something physical to channel my frustration into. Punching a bag did wonders for clearing my head. Still, there were moments when doubt crept back in. Late at night, lying awake in bed, I'd wonder if I'd missed something. If I could have done more to save our marriage. But then I'd remember Ramirez's words, some people aren't worth figuring out. And she was right. Sarah made her choice, and no amount of second-guessing on my part would change that. One Friday afternoon, as I was packing up my desk to leave early, my boss called me into his office. Captain Meyer was a gruff man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual scowl etched onto his face. He wasn't one for small talk, so when he gestured for me to sit down, I knew this wasn't going to be a casual chat. "We've got a situation," he began without preamble, sliding a file across the desk toward me. Counterfeit operation resurfaced. Bigger this time. I opened the folder, scanning the contents. My stomach tightened as I recognized familiar names and faces, Trevor's crew. Or what was left of it. Apparently, after Trevor got locked up, someone else took over. Someone smarter. More dangerous. "This guy," Captain Meyer said, pointing to a grainy surveillance photo stapled to the report, "is running the show now. Calls himself Rook. No ID yet, but we think he's using Trevor's old network to expand operations. We need you on this." I nodded slowly, closing the file. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell him I wasn't ready for another high-stakes case, but I knew I couldn't. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about stopping someone who was causing real harm. Someone who might have been inspired by Trevor's half-baked schemes. "All right," I said, standing up. "I'll take it." Captain Meyer gave me a rare nod of approval. "Good. Just don't let this one get personal." His warning lingered in my mind as I drove home that evening. Personal? How could it not be personal? Trevor's betrayal had cost me everything, or so I thought. Now, here I was, staring down the barrel of another case tied directly to the mess Sarah had dragged me into. But maybe this was exactly what I needed. A chance to confront the chaos head-on, to prove to myself that I wasn't broken beyond repair. That I could still do the job I loved, even if it meant facing ghosts from my past. The investigation led me deep into the underbelly of the city, where shadows stretched long and trust was a luxury few could afford. Rook was slippery, always staying one step ahead. His operation wasn't confined to counterfeit cash anymore, he'd branched out into identity theft, smuggling, and even weapons trafficking. Every lead we followed seemed to evaporate before we could act on it. Then came the break we'd been waiting for. An informant tipped us off about a meeting between Rook and several key players in his organization. The location. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Perfect for a sting operation, if we moved fast enough. As I suited up in tactical gear alongside my team, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another bust. It felt like closure. Not for Sarah or Trevor, but for me. For the man I used to be, the man I hope to become again. We stormed the warehouse under cover of darkness, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The place smelled of rust and decay, the air thick with tension. My heart pounded in my chest as we swept each room, searching for any sign of Rook. And then we found him. He was younger than I expected, barely older than Trevor had been. Lean, wiry, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. When we cornered him, he didn't panic or plead for mercy. Instead, he smirked, a chilling echo of Trevor's arrogance. "You're too late," he sneered as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You think locking me up stops anything? There'll always be someone else. Always another Rook." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let him see it. "Maybe," I replied evenly. "But tonight, it's you." As we escorted him out, I caught sight of something glinting in the corner of the room. A gold necklace, partially hidden beneath a pile of debris. I picked it up, examining it closely. My blood ran cold. It was Sarah's. She must have given it to Trevor, or maybe Rook himself, during their dealings. Either way, finding it here felt like a punch to the gut. Another reminder of how deeply entangled she'd been in all of this. For a moment, I considered pocketing it, letting it disappear along with everything else. But instead, I handed it over to evidence. Letting go wasn't easy, but holding on wouldn't bring me peace. Later that night, sitting alone in my apartment, I poured myself a drink and stared out the window at the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, distant yet constant. Life went on, whether we wanted it to or not. Sarah's betrayal had shattered me, no question. But it hadn't destroyed me. Through pain and anger, I'd found strength I didn't know I had. Strength to rebuild, to move forward, to keep fighting, for justice, for myself, for whatever future lay ahead. Because sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought against others. They're fought within. And winning doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning to live with the scars. The days following Rook's arrest were a blur of debriefings, paperwork, and media coverage. The Bureau hailed the takedown as a major victory, a triumph against organized crime in our city. For once, I didn't mind the spotlight. It felt good to be recognized for something positive after months of feeling like my life was unraveling at the seams. But even as I stood in front of reporters answering questions about the operation, part of me remained detached. The applause and congratulations couldn't drown out the quiet voice inside me asking, what now? Arresting Rook had been cathartic, sure, but it wasn't the end of my journey, it was just another step along the way. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through old case files on my laptop. Call it nostalgia or maybe habit, but I found myself revisiting some of the cases that had shaped my career, the dangerous busts, the close calls, the moments when I truly made a difference. Each file told a story, not just of criminals brought to justice, but of lives saved, communities protected, and hope restored. And then I stumbled upon a name I hadn't thought about in years, Marcus Hale. Marcus had been one of my earliest cases, a troubled kid caught up in gang violence who chose to turn his life around after serving time. Back then, I'd taken him under my wing, mentoring him through probation and helping him find legitimate work. We'd stayed in touch sporadically over the years, but life had gotten in the way, and eventually, we lost contact. Something about seeing his name again struck a chord. Maybe it was the reminder that people could change, that redemption wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for. Or maybe it was the realization that, despite everything I'd been through, I still believed in second chances. I decided to look him up. It didn't take long to track him down. Turns out, Marcus was running a community center in a rough part of town, offering programs for at-risk youth. When I called him, he sounded surprised but genuinely happy to hear from me. "Agent Carter," he said, laughing. "Man, it's been forever. What brings you calling?" "I've been thinking about old times," I admitted. Figured it was overdue to check in. We arranged to meet the next day at the community center. Walking through its doors felt surreal, like stepping into a different world. The walls were covered with colorful murals painted by local kids, and the air buzzed with energy. Teens played basketball in the gym, while younger children gathered around tables doing crafts. It was chaos, but a beautiful kind of chaos, the kind born out of hope rather than despair. Marcus greeted me with a firm handshake and a grin. "Never thought I'd see the day when you showed up here. Guess miracles really do happen." We talked for hours, catching up on everything that had happened since we last saw each other. He told me about the struggles he faced after leaving prison, the temptation to fall back into old habits, the judgment he endured from people who doubted he could change. But he also spoke passionately about the work he was doing now, helping others avoid the same mistakes he'd made. "It's not easy," he admitted. "Some days, I feel like I'm shouting into the void. But every kid who walks out of here with a diploma instead of a record makes it worth it." Listening to him, I felt a flicker of inspiration ignite within me. For so long, I defined myself by my role as an FBI agent, as someone who took bad guys off the streets. But what if there was more to it than that? What if my purpose wasn't just about stopping crime, but preventing it? Over the next few weeks, I started volunteering at the center. At first, it was small stuff, coaching basketball, teaching self-defense classes, sharing stories about my own experiences growing up in a tough neighborhood. But as I spent more time there, I realized how much these kids needed someone to believe in them, someone to show them they weren't defined by their circumstances. One evening, as I walked home from the center, I stopped by the waterfront to watch the sunset. The city lights reflected off the water, casting shimmering ripples across the surface. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt whole. Not healed, exactly, some wounds run too deep for that, but grounded. Purposeful. And yet, there was still one piece missing. Sarah. Not her specifically, but the unresolved anger and pain she'd left behind. As much as I wanted to move on, I knew I couldn't fully heal until I confronted those emotions head-on. So, I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I requested a visitation with her in prison. She looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in the sterile visiting room. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, but her eyes still held that same defiance I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke, we simply stared at each other, two strangers bound together by shared history. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why are you here, John?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe to understand. To make sense of it all." She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "You won't find any answers here. Humor me." For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor, a flash of vulnerability beneath the bravado. She hesitated before speaking, choosing her words carefully. "It wasn't about Trevor," she said quietly. "Not really. It was about me. About feeling trapped, suffocated. Like I'd given up pieces of myself to fit into your world, and I resented you for it. Her confession hit hard, but not in the way I expected. Instead of fueling my anger, it softened it. Suddenly, I could see her not as the villain in my story, but as a flawed human being trying, and failing, to find her place in the world. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said gently. But I think I understand now. And maybe that's enough. We didn't say much after that. There wasn't much left to say. But as I stood to leave, I felt a weight lift, a fragile thread of closure woven between us. Walking out of the prison, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's actions. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying their mistakes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Healing rarely is. But I was ready to face it, not as the man I used to be, but as the man I was becoming. Stronger. Wiser. Whole. Because sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. Life has a funny way of testing you when you least expect it. Just as I began to settle into my new rhythm, volunteering at the community center, finding peace in small victories, I received a call that shook me to my core. It was Captain Meyer. His voice was unusually grave, even for him. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "Rook's crew isn't done. They're planning something big, and they're targeting civilians." My stomach tightened. Despite Rook's arrest, his operation had continued to thrive underground, fueled by desperation and revenge. The Bureau suspected retaliation against law enforcement, but targeting innocent people. That was a new level of cruelty. "Do we know where?" I asked, already grabbing my jacket. "Not yet. But they left us a message, a warning." He paused, then added, "They mentioned your name." The room seemed to tilt slightly. My name. Why would they single me out? Unless... "Sarah," I whispered, though it wasn't really a question. Captain Meyer confirmed my suspicion. She talked. Apparently, she gave them intel about you during her time with Trevor. Names, locations, vulnerabilities. Enough to make you a target. I sank onto the couch, gripping the phone tightly. Betrayal hit me again, sharper than before, not because Sarah had chosen someone else, but because her actions were endangering lives. Innocent lives. People who trusted agents like me to protect them. "I'll handle it," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "That's what I'm afraid of," Meyer replied. "Don't let this get personal, Carter. We need you focused." He hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Focused? How could I stay focused when every decision I'd made over the past year felt like it was unraveling? Later that night, I sat in my truck outside the prison where Sarah was being held. Part of me wanted to march in there and demand answers, to confront her face to face about the chaos she'd unleashed. But another part of me knew that wouldn't solve anything. She'd already made her choices, just as I'd made mine. Instead, I drove to the waterfront, parking near the pier where I often went to clear my head. The city lights danced across the water, their reflections broken and distorted by the gentle waves. It reminded me of my own reflection, fractured, incomplete, but still intact. As I stared out at the horizon, I thought about everything I'd lost, my marriage, my sense of security, even my faith in humanity at times. Yet somehow, I'd managed to rebuild. Not perfectly, but enough to keep moving forward. And now, here I was again, facing another test. Only this time, it wasn't just about me. This time, others depended on me to stop the fallout from Sarah's betrayal. The next morning, I threw myself into the investigation with renewed determination. If Rook's crew was planning an attack, we needed to find them before they struck. Every lead mattered, no matter how small. Every clue brought us closer to stopping them. One piece of evidence stood out among the rest, a map marked with potential targets. Schools, hospitals, public transit hubs, all places teeming with unsuspecting people. Their plan was clear: create maximum fear and destruction. But one location caught my eye, the community center where Marcus worked. It wasn't just any center, it was a symbol of hope in a neighborhood plagued by violence. Hitting it would send a message far louder than striking anywhere else. I called Marcus immediately. "Listen carefully," I said, cutting straight to the point. "There's a credible threat against the center. You need to evacuate everyone and shut it down until further notice." Marcus hesitated, his frustration evident. "John, you know how hard it is to get these kids off the streets. If we close, some of them won't come back." "I know," I replied firmly. "But if we don't, they might not have a chance to come back at all." Reluctantly, he agreed, and within hours, the center was empty. Officers patrolled the perimeter, keeping watch for any suspicious activity. Still, the tension was palpable. Waiting for something to happen, and knowing it would happen, was excruciating. That night, as I reviewed surveillance footage from the surrounding area, I spotted movement near the center's loading dock. A shadowy figure slipped inside, carrying what looked like a duffel bag. My pulse quickened. This was it. Calling for backup, I moved cautiously toward the building. Adrenaline surged through me as I approached the door, weapon drawn. Inside, the figure was crouched low, fiddling with wires connected to several devices scattered around the room. FBI. I shouted, stepping into view. Drop the bag and put your hands up. The figure froze, then slowly turned to face me. To my shock, it wasn't one of Rook's crew members, it was Sarah. Her eyes widened in panic as she recognized me. John, please. What are you doing here? I demanded, my voice sharp with disbelief. You're supposed to be in prison. They let me out, she stammered. For good behavior. I didn't know what else to do, they said they'd kill me if I didn't help them. So you came here to finish the job? I snapped. To destroy the one thing standing between these kids and the streets. No, she cried. I came here to stop it. To undo what I started. Please, John, you have to believe me. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I trust her? After everything she'd done, after all the pain she'd caused, could she really change? Or was this just another lie? Before I could decide, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. Reinforcements had arrived. As officers swarmed the room, securing Sarah and disarming the explosives, I stepped back, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Betrayal. Anger. Hope. In the days that followed, Sarah was taken back into custody, this time under heavier charges. Whether she truly intended to stop the attack or was simply trying to save herself remained unclear. But one thing was certain, her actions had saved lives, including those of the kids at the community center. As for me, I returned to the center once it reopened, more determined than ever to continue the work I'd started. Marcus greeted me with a grateful smile, clapping me on the shoulder. You did good, man, he said. Real good. I nodded, though I didn't feel like celebrating. Saving the center felt like a victory, but it also served as a reminder of how fragile progress could be. One wrong move, one moment of weakness, and everything could fall apart. Still, I chose to focus on the positives. The kids who smiled brighter because they had somewhere safe to go. The parents who breathed easier knowing their children were protected. The knowledge that, despite everything, I was making a difference. Because sometimes, life isn't about avoiding the storms, it's about learning to weather them. And maybe, just maybe, finding a little sunshine along the way. Life at the community center returned to its usual rhythm after the scare with Sarah and Rook's crew. The kids were back, laughter filled the halls again, and Marcus and I worked tirelessly to ensure the center remained a sanctuary for those who needed it most. For the first time in months, I felt like I was truly making progress, not just in my own healing, but in helping others heal too. But life has a way of reminding you that no victory is final. One evening, as I packed up my things to leave the center, Marcus approached me with a troubled expression. Got a minute? He asked, motioning toward his office. Sure, I replied, following him inside. He closed the door behind us, his normally confident demeanor replaced by unease. There's something you need to know, he began, pacing the small room. It's about Sarah. My stomach clenched. Just hearing her name brought back a flood of emotions, anger, regret, confusion. What about her? She reached out to me, Marcus admitted, running a hand over his shaved head. She claims she's innocent, that she was set up. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Set up? By whom? By someone high up in law enforcement. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Someone who wanted Rook taken down but didn't care about collateral damage. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're saying, what? That Sarah's been framed. I'm saying it's possible, Marcus said firmly. Look, I don't trust her either, but she gave me evidence, documents, recordings, that suggest she wasn't acting alone. Someone fed her information, manipulated her into doing their dirty work. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Could it be true? Had Sarah been used as a pawn in someone else's game? And if so, why hadn't she come forward sooner? Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice low. Because I think you deserve answers, Marcus replied. And because, whether you want to admit it or not, you still care about her. Even after everything. His words stung, not because they weren't true, but because they cut too close to the truth. No matter how much I wanted to hate Sarah, a part of me still remembered the woman I'd married, the one who'd once stood by my side through thick and thin. Determined to uncover the truth, I requested access to Sarah's case files. At first, Captain Meyer refused, citing protocol and security concerns. But when I pushed harder, threatening to go above his head if necessary, he reluctantly handed over the documents. What I found shocked me. Buried deep within the files were inconsistencies, gaps in timelines, conflicting witness statements, even altered reports. Someone had gone to great lengths to paint Sarah as the mastermind behind Rook's operation, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. And then there was the surveillance footage, grainy video clips showing shadowy figures meeting with Sarah, whispering instructions and handing over cash. But here's the thing, they never showed her face clearly. Whoever had edited the footage had deliberately obscured her identity, leaving just enough doubt to make her guilty by association. As I pieced together the fragments, a chilling realization dawned on me: Sarah might not have been the villain after all. She might have been another victim, a scapegoat created to cover up someone else's crimes. The next step was risky, but I knew I had no choice. I arranged a private meeting with Sarah under the guise of gathering more intel for the bureau. When I walked into the visiting room, she looked surprised to see me, but not entirely shocked. "Why are you really here, John?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and resignation. "I need to know the truth," I said, sitting across from her. "All of it. No lies this time." For a moment, she studied me, searching for something in my eyes. Then she nodded, taking a deep breath. "They came to me months ago," she began, her voice trembling. "Said they could protect me, from Trevor, from Rook, from everything. All I had to do was play along. Follow orders. So I did. I didn't realize until it was too late that they were using me to take the fall for their mistakes." "Who are they?" I pressed. She hesitated, fear flickering across her face. "I can't say. Not here. If they find out I talked." Her words trailed off, but the implication was clear. Whoever was pulling the strings had power and reach far beyond what I'd imagined. Back at headquarters, I dug deeper, cross-referencing names and connections. It wasn't easy, every lead seemed to vanish before I could act on it. But eventually, I stumbled upon something damning, a series of encrypted emails between Captain Meyer and a shadowy figure known only as the Architect. The messages detailed plans to dismantle Rook's operation, but also included instructions to frame Sarah as the ringleader. My blood ran cold. Meyer. My boss. The man I'd trusted for years. Confronting him was dangerous, but I couldn't ignore the evidence. I cornered him in his office late one night, holding up the decrypted emails. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, slamming the printouts onto his desk. Meyer's face went pale, but he quickly masked his shock with anger. "You shouldn't be poking around in places you don't belong, Carter." "This isn't about me," I shot back. "This is about justice. You framed an innocent woman to cover your tracks. How many others have you sacrificed to keep your hands clean?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You don't understand, John. Sometimes, the ends justify the means. Rook was a threat, an existential danger to this city. We needed someone to take the blame, someone expendable. And you chose Sarah," I spat, disgust rising in my throat. "She made herself easy to manipulate," he admitted coldly. "But don't pretend you're any better than me. You've done things you aren't proud of too. Sacrifices for the greater good." His words struck a nerve, but I refused to let him twist the narrative. "There's a difference between sacrifice and betrayal. You crossed a line, Meyer. And I won't let you get away with it." Before he could respond, I activated the recording app on my phone, capturing every word. By the time I left his office, I had everything I needed to expose the truth. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. Meyer was arrested, along with several other high-ranking officials implicated in the conspiracy. Sarah's charges were dropped, though she remained wary of trusting anyone, including me. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly during our final visit. "After everything I've done, you could have walked away." "Maybe," I admitted. "But walking away wouldn't have changed anything. Not for you, not for me. Justice isn't perfect, Sarah. But it's worth fighting for." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, John. For believing in me. Even when I didn't believe in myself." As I left the prison that day, I realized something important: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward, even when the path is uncertain. And sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories, not just for ourselves, but for those we strive to protect. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way home. The dust had barely settled after Meyer's arrest when the Bureau launched an internal investigation into the corruption that had festered within its ranks. Agents were interrogated, files scrutinized, and policies rewritten in an attempt to rebuild trust, not just among the public, but within the organization itself. It was a necessary step, but one that left many feeling raw and vulnerable, including me. For weeks, I sat through interviews and hearings, recounting everything I'd uncovered about Meyer and the Architect. Each retelling reopened old wounds, forcing me to confront not only what Sarah had endured but also my role in the system that had failed her. The guilt wasn't mine to bear, at least, not entirely, but it lingered nonetheless, a reminder of how easily power could corrupt even those sworn to uphold justice. When the dust finally cleared, I found myself at a crossroads. My career as an FBI agent had defined me for so long, shaping who I was and what I stood for. But now, staring down the barrel of uncertainty, I couldn't help but wonder, who was I without the badge? Without the constant pursuit of justice? One evening, as I walked home from the community center, I stopped by the waterfront again, the same spot where I'd spent countless nights reflecting on my life before. The city lights shimmered across the water, casting ripples that mirrored the turbulence inside me. For once, though, the chaos felt different, not destructive, but transformative. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. I turned to see Ramirez standing behind me, hands tucked into the pockets of her leather jacket. She offered a small smile, one that softened the sharp edges of her usual no-nonsense demeanor. Something like that, I admitted, gesturing for her to join me. What brings you out here? I heard about the fallout, she said simply, leaning against the railing beside me. Thought you might need someone to talk to. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the waves lap at the shore. Finally, I spoke. Do you ever feel like, maybe we're fighting the wrong battles? Like no matter how hard we try, the bad guys always find a way to win. Ramirez chuckled dryly. Every damn day. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Justice isn't about winning or losing, it's about doing what's right, even when it feels impossible. Her words resonated deeply, yet they didn't fully answer the question gnawing at me. And if doing what's right means walking away? What then? She studied me carefully, her gaze piercing. Then maybe walking away is the right thing to do, for now. Doesn't mean you're giving up. Just means you're figuring out where you belong next. Her advice stayed with me over the following days, echoing in my mind whenever doubt crept in. I began to seriously consider leaving the Bureau, not because I didn't believe in its mission anymore, but because I needed space to rediscover who I was outside of it. The decision wasn't easy, it meant stepping away from the only life I'd ever known. But deep down, I knew it was the right choice. Before making it official, I paid one last visit to Sarah. She was staying at a halfway house while reintegrating into society, still wary of trusting anyone, including herself. When I arrived, she greeted me with cautious optimism, unsure of why I'd come. I wanted to say goodbye, I explained, sitting across from her in the sparse visiting room. I'm leaving the Bureau. Taking some time to figure things out. Her eyes widened in surprise. You're quitting? Because of me? No, I said firmly. Because of me. You helped me see that sometimes, the hardest part of healing is letting go. Of anger, of regret, of the person you used to be. She nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. I never deserved that, John. Any of it. Not your forgiveness, not your help. But thank you anyway. There's no debt to repay, I replied gently. Just, promise me you'll keep fighting. For yourself, this time. I will, she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion thickening it. And I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. With that chapter closed, I turned my attention to the future, or rather, to building one. Marcus welcomed me back to the community center with open arms, offering me a permanent role as a mentor and program coordinator. At first, I hesitated, worried I wouldn't measure up to the responsibilities. But as I worked alongside him, guiding kids through challenges both big and small, I realized something profound: this was where I belonged. Not chasing criminals, but preventing them. It wasn't glamorous work, nor was it free of setbacks. Some days, frustration threatened to overwhelm me, when a kid skipped class, when funding fell short, when progress seemed impossibly slow. But then there were moments that made it all worthwhile: a teenager graduating high school against all odds. A child smiling for the first time in months. A parent thanking me for giving their family hope. Through it all, I continued to heal, not perfectly, but enough to keep moving forward. The scars of my past remained, reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. But they no longer defined me. Instead, they shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Months later, as I stood on the rooftop of the community center watching fireworks light up the night sky, I felt a rare sense of peace. Life hadn't given me the answers I'd once sought, it rarely did. But it had taught me something far more valuable: that redemption isn't a destination, it's a journey. And sometimes, the greatest victories aren't the ones we achieve alone, but the ones we share with others. Below me, laughter and cheers rose from the crowd gathered in celebration. Among them were faces I'd grown to love: Marcus, the kids, volunteers, neighbors, all united by a shared belief in second chances. As the final burst of color faded into darkness, I smiled softly, letting the moment wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Life at the community center became my anchor, a steady rhythm of mentoring, teaching, and guiding kids who reminded me so much of myself at their age. Each day brought its own challenges, but also moments of profound connection. Watching these young people grow and change gave me a sense of fulfillment I'd never experienced as an FBI agent. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly making a difference, not by stopping crime after it happened, but by preventing it from taking root in the first place. But just as I began to settle into this new chapter of my life, fate threw another curveball. One afternoon, as I was helping a group of teens practice self-defense techniques in the gym, Marcus approached me with a grim expression. "We've got a problem," he said quietly, motioning for me to follow him into his office. Inside, he closed the door behind us and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a letter, handwritten and unsigned. The message was brief but chilling. "You think you can save them? You're only delaying the inevitable. The streets always win." My stomach tightened as I read the words again, searching for any clue about who might have sent it. "When did this show up?" I asked, my voice low. "This morning," Marcus replied. "It was slipped under the front door. No cameras caught anyone leaving it." I glanced at him, seeing the worry etched on his face. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" He shook his head. "No. But whoever wrote it knows what they're doing. They're trying to scare us, and the kids, into backing down." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of the threat hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the dangers lurking beyond the safety of these walls. We'd worked too hard to build this haven. I wasn't about to let some coward tear it apart. "We don't back down," I said firmly. "Not now, not ever. Whoever this is, they picked the wrong fight." Marcus nodded, though his eyes betrayed lingering unease. "Agreed. But we need to be smart about this. If they're watching us, we can't afford to make mistakes." Over the next few days, we increased security at the center, installing additional cameras and hiring off-duty officers to patrol the perimeter. Still, the tension remained palpable. Kids whispered nervously in the hallways, parents called to check on their children more frequently, and even the staff seemed on edge. Despite the precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. The letter hadn't been idle intimidation, it was a declaration of intent. And I knew from experience that threats like this rarely stayed empty for long. Then, late one night, my fears were confirmed. I was locking up the center when I heard the sound of breaking glass from the far side of the building. My heart raced as I grabbed a flashlight and hurried toward the noise. Peering through the darkness, I saw two shadowy figures slipping inside through a shattered window. They moved quickly, carrying duffel bags filled with what looked like accelerants. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping into view. "You don't want to do this." They froze, startled, then turned to face me. One of them, a wiry teenager with a hoodie pulled low over his face, hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do next. The other, older and bulkier, stepped forward menacingly. "This ain't your business, old man," he growled. "Walk away before you regret it." I stood my ground, adrenaline coursing through me. "This is my business. These kids deserve better than whatever mess you're dragging them into." The younger one shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me and his partner. "Man, maybe we should just go." "Shut up," the older guy snapped, shoving him aside. Then, turning back to me, he sneered. "Fine. Have it your way." Before I could react, he lunged at me, swinging wildly. I dodged the first punch, countering with a swift strike to his ribs. He staggered back, cursing, but recovered quickly, grabbing a crowbar from his bag. Panic surged through me as I realized I was outmatched, but retreat wasn't an option. Just as he raised the weapon to strike, a voice rang out from behind him. "Stop right there." It was Marcus, armed with a baseball bat and flanked by two volunteers. The sight of reinforcements threw the attackers off balance, giving me the opening I needed to disarm the older men. Within seconds, both intruders were subdued, trembling as police sirens wailed in the distance. As officers led them away, I turned to Marcus, breathing heavily. "Thanks for having my back." He grinned, though relief was evident in his eyes. "Always, man. Always." In the aftermath of the attempted arson, the community rallied around the center, donating funds and supplies to repair the damage. Parents volunteered extra hours, and local businesses offered discounts and support. It was a testament to the impact we'd made, and a reminder that hope could inspire even in the face of fear. Still, the incident left me shaken. Not because I doubted our ability to protect the center, but because it highlighted the fragility of the progress we'd fought so hard to achieve. The streets did try to reclaim those who dared to rise above them. But as I watched the kids return to their routines, with smiles on their faces and determination in their eyes, I realized something important: fear only wins if you let it. That evening, as I sat on the rooftop overlooking the city, I reflected on how far I'd come since Sarah's betrayal and Meyer's corruption had shattered my world. Those events had forced me to confront painful truths about myself and the system I'd dedicated my life to serving. But they'd also pushed me to find a new path, one rooted in compassion, resilience, and hope. Below me, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, each one representing a story, a struggle, a dream. Among them were the stories of the kids at the center, their battles, their triumphs, their endless potential. And while I couldn't shield them from every danger, I could stand beside them, offering guidance and strength whenever they needed it. Because sometimes, the greatest act of bravery isn't facing danger alone, it's choosing to believe in others, even when the odds seem insurmountable. As I gazed out at the horizon, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Life would continue to test me, to challenge me, to push me to my limits. But I was ready. Ready to keep fighting, not for revenge or recognition, but for the future of those who deserved a chance to rewrite their own stories. And in that moment, I knew I'd finally found my place. Months passed after the attempted arson at the community center, and life began to settle into a fragile rhythm once again. The repairs were completed, donations poured in, and the kids returned with renewed energy and determination. It was inspiring to see how resilience could transform fear into strength, a lesson I'd learned firsthand over the past year. But even as I threw myself into my work, there were moments when the ghosts of my past crept back in. Late at night, lying awake in my apartment, I'd find myself replaying old memories: Sarah's betrayal, Myers' corruption, Rook's cruelty. Each one carried its own weight, its own unanswered questions. Had I truly forgiven them? Or had I simply buried the pain deep enough that it no longer surfaced during the day? One evening, as I sat on the rooftop watching the sunset, Marcus joined me unexpectedly. He carried 2 cups of coffee, handing one to me before sitting down beside me. "You've been distant lately," he said casually, though his tone suggested concern. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Just thinking about the past. About everything that led me here." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That stuff never really goes away, does it? But it doesn't have to define you either." His words struck a chord, echoing something I'd told myself countless times but still struggled to fully believe. "It's not just about moving on," I admitted. "It's about figuring out what to carry forward, and what to leave behind." He smiled faintly. "Sounds like you're starting to figure it out." The next morning, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address caught my attention immediately. It was from Sarah. My stomach tightened as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. Her handwriting was neat, almost careful, as if she'd spent hours crafting each word. "Dear John, I hope this letter finds you well. I've thought a lot about our last conversation, and about everything you've done, not just for me, but for so many others. You've always been someone who fights for justice, even when it costs you personally. That's a rare kind of courage. I'm writing because I need to say thank you. Thank you for believing in me when no one else would. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible, even for someone like me. And thank you for letting me go, for giving me the space to start over. I know we'll never be the people we used to be, and maybe that's for the best. But I want you to know that I'll carry the lessons you taught me wherever I go. Not just the ones about forgiveness, but about finding purpose in the broken pieces. Take care of yourself, John. You deserve happiness more than anyone I know. Sincerely, Sarah." Her words left me speechless, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. For so long, I'd carried anger and resentment toward her, convinced that her betrayal had defined us both. But reading her letter now, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just about releasing her, it was about freeing myself. Later that week, I decided to visit the waterfront one last time. It had become a place of reflection for me, a sanctuary where I could process the chaos of my life. As I stood overlooking the water, I noticed a familiar figure approaching. "Ramirez. Didn't think I'd find you here," she said, smiling softly. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "What brings you out this way?" She shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "Just checking in. Figured you might need someone to talk to." "I'm doing okay," I assured her. "Better than I expected, actually." "That's good to hear," she said, glancing at me sideways. "You've come a long way since everything went sideways." Her comment made me laugh softly. "Yeah, you could say that. Feels like another lifetime sometimes." "Maybe it is," she mused. "People change, John. Especially when they're forced to confront their worst fears. You didn't just survive, you grew. That's something to be proud of." Her words stayed with me long after she left, resonating deeply as I walked home under the fading twilight. She was right, I had changed. Not overnight, but gradually, through every challenge and loss and triumph. I was no longer the man who clung to anger or sought validation through accolades. I was becoming someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. A few days later, I gathered the kids at the community center for a special meeting. They looked up at me curiously, sensing that something important was about to happen. "I want to tell you a story," I began, pacing slowly in front of them. "About a man who thought he knew exactly who he was. A man who believed his worth came from catching bad guys and saving the world. But then, life happened. His marriage fell apart. His career unraveled. Everything he thought he stood for crumbled around him. Several of the older teens exchanged nervous glances, clearly wondering where this was going. I smiled reassuringly before continuing. At first, he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. He felt lost, broken, like nothing would ever make sense again. But slowly, he started to realize something important. Life isn't about avoiding the storms, it's about learning to weather them. About finding meaning in the struggle and using it to help others. I paused, looking around the room at their faces, young, hopeful, full of potential. That man was me. And if I can get through all of that and still find a reason to keep going, then so can you. No matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, don't give up. Because you're stronger than you think. And together, we can build something better. When I finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Some of the younger kids cheered loudly, while others simply smiled, their eyes shining with determination. It was a small moment, but one that reminded me why I'd chosen this path, to inspire others, just as others had inspired me. As I locked up the center that night, I felt a rare sense of peace. The scars of my past remained, but they no longer weighed me down. Instead, they served as reminders of how far I'd come, and how much farther I could go. Because in the end, life isn't about erasing the pain. It's about transforming it into something meaningful. Something beautiful. And as I walked home under the starlit sky, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Life at the community center had become a tapestry of small victories and quiet moments of joy. The kids thrived under our guidance, their laughter echoing through the halls like music. Parents stopped by regularly to express gratitude, sharing stories of how their children had changed, how they'd found confidence, purpose, and hope. It was humbling to realize that my work here mattered, not because it was glamorous or celebrated, but because it was real. But even as I embraced this new chapter of my life, there were still shadows lurking in the corners. Memories of Sarah, Meyer, Rook, they lingered, faint but persistent, whispering reminders of the battles I'd fought and the scars I carried. I'd learned to live with them, to let them shape me without defining me. Still, I wondered if true closure was possible, or if some wounds simply never fully healed. Then, one crisp autumn morning, everything changed. I arrived at the center early, as usual, to prepare for the day's activities. As I unlocked the front door, I noticed an envelope taped to the glass. Curious, I peeled it off and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in bold, block letters. Meet me at the waterfront by sunset. Come alone. My pulse quickened. There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. But something about the tone felt familiar, urgent, demanding, yet strangely personal. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After everything I'd been through, I wasn't eager to dive headfirst into another mystery. But curiosity got the better of me. Whoever had sent this message clearly knew me, and likely knew where I'd been spending my time lately. If they intended harm, staying away wouldn't stop them. And if they needed help, well, that's what I was here for. As sunset approached, I made my way to the waterfront, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this someone from my past? A remnant of Meyer's corruption? Or perhaps someone connected to Sarah? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Whatever awaited me, I would face it head-on. When I arrived, the pier was deserted save for one figure standing near the edge, silhouetted against the golden light of the setting sun. As I drew closer, recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. It was Trevor. He looked older, thinner, his once cocky demeanor replaced by a haunted expression. His hands trembled slightly as he turned to face me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "John," he said hoarsely, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know who else to turn to. My jaw tightened as anger surged within me. Of all the people who could have reached out, why him? The men who'd helped destroy my marriage, who'd betrayed not just me but countless others. Yet, despite my rage, I forced myself to listen. "What do you want, Trevor?" I asked coldly, keeping my distance. "I need your help," he admitted, his voice cracking. "They're coming for me. For us." "They?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. "Who are they?" "The architect," he replied, his eyes darting nervously. "The same person who framed Sarah. They're cleaning house, John. Anyone who knows too much is being silenced, for good." A chill ran down my spine. The architect, the shadowy figure behind Meyer's conspiracy, was still out there. And now, apparently, they were targeting anyone who might expose their operation. "Why should I believe you?" I snapped. "You've lied before. Betrayed everyone around you. What makes this any different?" Trevor hesitated, then pulled a flash drive from his pocket and held it out to me. "Because I have proof. Everything they've done, all the names, the connections, the crimes, it's all on here. But I can't stop them alone. Neither can you. We need to work together." I stared at him, torn between distrust and duty. Could I trust Trevor after everything he'd done? Or was this just another manipulation, another ploy to save himself? But then I remembered Marcus's words, sometimes, doing the right thing means working with people you don't trust. Justice wasn't about vengeance, it was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Reluctantly, I took the flash drive. If you're lying to me. I'm not, he interrupted, his voice desperate. Please, John. You're the only one who can stop them. Over the next few days, Trevor and I worked tirelessly to decrypt the files on the flash drive. What we uncovered was staggering, a vast network of corruption spanning law enforcement, politics, and organized crime. The architect wasn't just one person, it was a cabal of powerful individuals operating in the shadows, pulling strings to maintain control. With the evidence in hand, we contacted a trusted journalist who specialized in exposing institutional corruption. Together, we orchestrated a plan to release the information publicly, ensuring maximum impact while minimizing risk to ourselves. It was dangerous work, and tensions ran high, but we both knew what was at stake. On the eve of the exposé, Trevor disappeared. At first, I feared the worst, that he'd been captured or killed. But when the story broke the following morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Thank you, John. For believing in me, even when no one else would. Take care of yourself. It was Trevor. He'd vanished into the wind, leaving behind nothing but those final words. Part of me wanted to chase after him, to demand answers. But deep down, I understood. Some people didn't seek redemption, they sought survival. And maybe, in his own twisted way, Trevor had found both. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the exposé rocked the city. Dozens of arrests were made, including several high-profile figures implicated in the architects' network. Public outrage sparked widespread reforms, forcing institutions to reckon with their failures and rebuild trust with the communities they served. For me, though, the victory felt bittersweet. Exposing the truth hadn't erased the pain of the past, it hadn't brought back the life I'd lost. But it had given me something equally valuable, clarity. Closure. A sense of purpose that extended beyond my own struggles. One evening, as I sat on the rooftop of the community center watching the stars, I reflected on how far I'd come. From the ashes of betrayal and loss, I'd built something meaningful, a sanctuary for those seeking refuge from the storms of life. And in doing so, I'd rediscovered pieces of myself I thought were gone forever. Marcus joined me, handing me a cup of coffee as he often did. Feels good, doesn't it? He asked, gesturing toward the bustling streets below. What does? I replied, smiling softly. Knowing you made a difference, he said simply. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else too. I nodded, gazing out at the city lights. Yeah. It does. As silence settled between us, I realized something profound. Life isn't about avoiding pain or chasing perfection. It's about embracing the broken pieces and using them to create something beautiful. Something lasting. And in that moment, surrounded by the laughter of kids playing in the distance and the glow of a city reborn, I finally felt whole.